Good evening, everyone. Please come up, settle, take a seat in our beautiful, newly renovated room. My name is Sharon Poley, and I am the executive director of the Fine Arts Work Center, and I am delighted to welcome here tonight and also our virtual audience. He's here with us. Thank you, Bruce Danzer, for joining us. I'd like to acknowledge. The Fine Arts Work Center is committed to a dual mission dedicated to encouraging the growth and development of visual artists and writers, as well as to amplifying the creative vitality of Provincetown. To further the first part of our mission, we found a 7-month fellowship in which 10 extraordinary writers are granted space to live and work in Provincetown, focus on new work, and create community. Welcome to all of our fellows tonight. To further the second part of our mission, we sent a free series of exhibitions and events, all free and open to the public in Provincetown. Tonight's event is part of this free public. We are honored to welcome current fellows Laura Cresté and Zainab this evening. This evening, we also invite you to view the work of visual arts fellow in the Hudson D. Walker Gallery. We are deeply grateful to all of our supporters who make our work. We are creating a community that truly shapes contemporary culture. Special thanks to our government partners, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, the Foundation of Cape Cod, the Fund for the Visual Arts on Cape Cod Foundation, the Homestead Foundation, and the Provincetown. We also want to highlight our partner, East End Books, at the back of the room, a independent bookseller who partners with us to manage our bookstore. Are available tonight following the reading, as well as via the East End website. To support the Fine Arts Work Center when making your purchase online, please just note EF. It's now to introduce my colleague, writing coordinator and past fellow, who will introduce and welcome this evening's fellows. Thank you.
Hi. Laura Cresté is the author of the forthcoming chapbook, You Should Feel Bad, which always feels like a tap, like you're going to stress the wrong one, which was selected for a 2019 Poetry Society of America. She holds an MFA in poetry from New York University and a BA from Bennington College. The winner of the Review's 2016 Pesarov Prize, journals including No Tokens, Tinderbox, and Bodega, and she has received support from the community of writers. Please welcome Laura Cresté.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Naya, for doing the live stream. The whole staff at the Work Center for making tonight happen. I just wanted to mention about my forthcoming chapbook. It's over on Jeff's table, so if you're interested, you can check it out. Thanks. And I'm going to be reading 5 poems. One of them is sort of long. It's a 4-pager. I'll start off with a shorter one that's set in the suburbs. And I steal the title from the most famous poet that I grew up in. This William Eric Williams, son of the poet doctor, until I was 4 and he died. A chickenpox shot and a sticker for being brave. Told him she knew the poem about the plums by heart. It wasn't really a poem, just a note for his mother. In the blue house on Ridge Road, I was knocking my heels against oblivious. I was eating a cherry lollipop, sticker to my velvet dress, ruining the feel. Mother hated and loved our town as much as I would one day. Very bad environment for poets, he called it, and that was pastoral. I've never seen chickens, and the only wheelbarrow here, red, chained to a tree beside the library. We had plums in our yard and crab apples until all the trees. Not quite 2 square miles, a dry town, a blue line painted between the yellow on the road outside the police station. I went to school with the children of too many cops. Their houses didn't grow any flowers. Would come back and would get drunk across the railroad tracks where bars go home with men who'd once starred in school plays. Backstage, I'd see costume changes. Like me, they lived with parents, but had finished basements, etc. On very close on the porch of that bar, waiting to get drunk enough to kiss someone, I could see the moon rising over the stadium in the distance. It was renamed for an insurance company. Other Imagine Giants. Does the microphone sound okay? Yeah. Okay. I'm sure I can never tell. All right, this next poem takes us out of the suburbs a bit during the first summer when my fiance and I were living in the Berkshires. And I promised featuring Mike, so here we go. Overripe. Sometimes it's like this. Slugs discover the basil no matter where we plant it. Batshit on the welcome mat. I cave in the burrow between cherry tomatoes and rosemary. Every day the chipmunks dig anew until I fill the hole with sticks, menacing as the Blair Witch. After the storm, I skim 1 dead frog, 3 dead newts, and 2 live ones from the pool. There are weevils in the flour, weevils in the sugar, and something in my bottle of vitamins, sweet as candy. Late tomatoes split, lewd as Jesus with his bloody heart, and the pool sloshes, reminding me how last night I saw lightning, or else the blue pulse of a device meant to drive rodents insane. Mike loves a never-ending task, so he collects twigs in the yard after every storm. But I believe in entropy and let it alone. I drive to the farm with a sign over corn on ice. Every corn has a worm, do not open to check. At the ignition turn, a chipmunk crawls out of the hood, and we astonish each other through the glass, a baby. Which is what I called Mike when he brooded, self-accusing, losing chess game after chess game. Don't be such a baby. He didn't like that. I could sit outside and watch the daily dramas play across the yard. Instead, I shut the door and read about a weasel Annie Dillard saw 40 years ago. The truth is, I can't stop thinking of the dead frog. Something terrible happened to its skin, the clear coating sliding off like jelly, a bubble taut across its mouth. Insurance stops covering my birth control, so I give it up and feel slightly more animal, sore breasts, and more so when I trade plastic for a shampoo bar and turn greasy from the coconut. When I was born, my aunt said my dark cap of hair was like an otter's pelt. The radishes never take. Snakes undulate in the pool and leave their skins behind on the stone wall. Flimsy dresses I'd shuck off as I climbed drunk into bed for years. The therapist in my phone asks if the meditation he prescribed is helping. Does it matter? I just need the summer to end, for the garden to die back a little. And this next one is a Provincetown poem. I wrote this in November, December, after going to see the dead baby humpback whale that had washed up at Long Point. A lot of the fellows went back to see it many times, and I haven't visited Liz's show yet. I highly recommend popping over there because she has a really beautiful picture. Oh, and also thank you to and HR for helping me edit this poem when I brought it into workshop. At the Lighthouse. Artists create for the future, but there's no longer a future. The visiting artist lectures, his projected works patterning his face. Sorry to break it to you. It was the winter of holding oysters in my mouth, apprehensive. The weight on my tongue like the glide of white jellyfish we palmed as children. How we'd sometimes crush them, extrude their broken bodies through the netting of our fingers, but more often admire translucent threads knitting the cutlet together and let them go. Because they lacked legible faces, attics to house a brain, we couldn't pity them. My grief then for the dead entangled whale might be for its size, the rude scale of the world. The humpback was a year when it was starved, muzzled by fishing line, and washed up at the base of the lighthouse, as if it could try its luck again on land. Bristle-mouthed, blue-eyed baby, shat upon by birds, dorsal fin wilted as picked wildflowers. The worst part is cracked skin, black gloss giving way to something like drywall. No, worse, the luster of aliveness gone from the still open eyes, or ripped flank spilling the great skein of blue intestine no one should have ever seen. Impossible to take in the emaciated hulk all at once, or its story. If it died before landing, or how long its mother stayed, whether she sunk to the floor like a stoved-in ship, or lived and followed her calf until the tide pulled out. 2 of my friends give birth this week, long waited for babies named years ago. I send books that foresee a future, when you grow up, and a hat shaped like a strawberry. We like to think we're unique in our capacity to love, but animals with intricate world brains do cherish and mourn. Sperm whales mother hard, cluster in a shape called marguerite to protect the young, nosing them into the seedy center, where they're crushed by mothers whose flukes pedal outward toward orcas or my own kind. Whalers would have looked at this landfall with hunger. Though a starved whale hardly serves industry, oil always the point of harpoon and invasion and black slick birds and melting ice, all for a substance wetter than water that makes the gears of the world turn. If I am hungry, it is only to look. During the fall migration, I watched whales' shining backs emerge like my own knees in the bath. Their rolling flukes, callosities, and piebalding skin like the sycamores of my suburb. I wanted to see an eye breach in recognition above the surface. Now I get my fill of the eye, served raw, chapped, helplessly open before gulls. It thrilled the walk to the deathbed, and then it appalled. Necropsy left a window cut into its flank, where, a week after dying, the calf was still letting its mammalian blood, red as anyone I know. Red as my cousin's, her recent seizure, the bad Latin it won, how she bit her tongue and the blood flooded her mouth. Her husband shouted to the dispatcher, "Help, my wife is dying." Another cousin sends me suicidal poems, swears it calms intrusive thoughts, that he won't act, then emails a new poem that goes, "I lied." But they both survive. I send each my least gruesome whale photo, because I don't mean to convey that the world is a shipwreck, only that I'm thinking of you. Small offering from this sandy scrap of land, my temporary home at the artist residency, where we dig up clams and decorate with sea detritus, horseshoe crab carapace adorning the coffee table, drunken potlucks. We play a game of questions meant to make us fall in love. I'm asked, "What are you overthinking right now?" and answer, "The choice to have children." A painter says, "I'll tell you the truth, you shouldn't." She possesses the authority of one who reels in squid at night, serves us the mussel cold, chopped in salad, and paints shadows with the ink sac. I guess you guys know who I'm talking about. Weeks later, we go again to the watery beer, where the whale's open mouth streams rot. Death particulate enters our noses and touches us inside, while fin bones push through skin, growing toward light. A poet asks if we resent how humans keep going into space when there's so much we don't understand about female anatomy or what lives in the deepest trench. We do, but there are whales in space. NASA greases rockets with their oil, and the gold record of the Voyager is drifting in that other sea, inlaid with the humpback song. A month dead, the whale is peeled like a clementine, blubber white as pith, matter that would have been sliced thin, Bible leaves, and melted, sclera of eyes eaten. That night, we throw a birthday party, and death enters our throats. The sculptor returns from the city, its galleries filled with hot breath and congratulations. The virus in his lungs takes flight and closes the distance between us, spiders crossing oceans on silk and faith alone. We all fall ill and wheeze, feel like dolls forgotten on the shore, inner cavities sopping up the tides. We leave soup at each other's doors, poured into old yogurt quarts, shimmering chicken fat and floating dill. We suck at asthma inhalers, bitter clouds dispensed from plastic spouts the colors of bath toys. Whales once formed the observable world, present as plastic. Not just candle and lantern, but piano key, dog food, sole of shoe. Whales constructed the idealized female form, baleen of the mouth bound into corsets, their livers juiced for vitamin A. A psychiatrist wants to talk about my liver, reminds me men are allowed 2 drinks per day, women only 1. But I want what the men get, always have. In class with a venerable old poet and his favorites, I prattled on as much as those boys who dismissed certain poems as precious. I don't know why I think of this, what is meant by precious, when my lungs are growing knotted rack and razor clam. He never asks for family history, so I don't tell the psychiatrist about my grandfather's liver, the sea change of liquor and cancer. Men can't get away with it either. There's no medicine for this. We wait for the virus to pass through us like weather, unclear if it will be rainstorm or tornado. There is much in this world I can't fathom or love, but I understand why the ideal shape of woman was an hourglass. The center narrows to a point, ears always funneling down. Okay, that's the longest one I'll read. I have 2 left, and I promise they're not as long. And I should mention that the sculptor in this poem is just a composite figure, because a lot of people went to New York, and I don't know who brought COVID back with them. So it's just, so nobody take that personally, please. Okay. Right, so the next one is called How We Love. We love bad dogs the way we love bad men. No woman in my family would admit this, but it must be true, or else why would we keep bringing them home? We love dogs who draw blood without warning, men who kick in doors and call us crazy. It's not fantasy about the power to change, that you can love someone into kindness. It's a simple gospel of staying, gold ring estate jewelry, and trading for a new name. We love like a sentence that once given cannot be rescinded. In the blue glow of a crime show, my aunt says, if that were my father, I would still love him and visit him in prison. A serial killer, I prod, trying to distinguish between crimes of bad impulse and a real true joy in violence, ropes, knives. Even then, she says. Her tall, senile dog has scarred 2 faces, nipped a woman's chin, and worse, snarled open the delicate skin of her nephew's brow, requiring stitches, nearly skewering the eye. When explaining to my fiancé how I was raised, I insist on my own good sense, claim to be different, will not love what I cannot trust. Yet when that dog, so tall we called him the horse, approached me at eye level, I did not turn from his clouded gaze or black, healthy gums as he put his mouth to my cheek. I'm not immune from wanting the rank breath of the wild. I extend my face, soft with hope, and expect to be spared. And this is the last poem. Thank you all for being here and for coming out on such a rainy night. And it's such an honor to read with Zainab, a writer who I really love. So excited. This poem is called Ida. The water entered twice, rose from the cellar, and fell through the roof. In the guts of the house, past the drop ceiling, 100-year-old horsehair insulation, wet and furring the walls, as if coming alive in the squall. A horse reborn out of water, a myth never written down. In the basement, my father, ankle deep, argued with the sump pump, chancing electrocution. We were going to lose it all. Dollhouse, children's drawings, books, though not the crumbling volumes my grandfather troubled to send by ship. Maybe the water remembered having spared them before, on their long freighted trip from Argentina to Spain. Perched high on wooden shelves, basement sloshing below, they are beautiful, leather-bound, purposeless. No one we know wants Hawthorne or Beckett in Spanish. Yet nothing makes me feel closer to my grandfather than the necessity of translation. One day I'll be duty-bound to keep a row, though I have no permanent address. A house at this moment seems a burden, breached walls already beginning to bloom into mildew. We bailed with mugs, floodwater brackish as yerba mate. People were drowning downriver, but we didn't yet know. We could have guessed as we shifted through dripping newspapers, real ones with my father's bylines, and then my invention of a hometown paper where I drafted disaster. A terrible fire in New York, over 103 people dead. I had never seen a fire, but I was willing to imagine. Back when we played Would You Rather, burn or freeze, fire or water, I was never afraid of water. A thought experiment we still play when deciding where to live. Which natural disaster can you stand? When my parents chose hurricane, they thought there'd be no tornadoes, but they touched down now and again, like migratory birds charting a new course. Before hurricanes were named, they were rare enough to be tagged by a year, as if devastation was only annual, if that. The great hurricane of '38 swallowed houses up the New England coast, churning mouthful of debris, lamppost in the maw, almost jaunty as a pencil in a child's mouth. A family in Rhode Island climbed to the third-floor servants' quarters, and when the roof was torn off them like a scab, they found themselves in the ocean, fashioned a raft out of the ceiling beams, and sailed through the wreckage unharmed. But the servants couldn't swim. If it were true that the water remembered, a crate of yellowed books floated between countries, the flood would recognize the water in all of us, my neighbors downriver washed away in their cars. If it were true, the water would recall the sightless sea they were made in, and it would carry them still. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Laura. That's so good. That's a tough act to follow, Zainab. You feel ready? Okay. All right. Zeynep Özakat was born and raised in Istanbul. Her writing has appeared in Glimmer Train Stories, where she won the Fiction Open Contest, in Black Warrior Review, and in Gulf Coast Online. She holds an MFA in creative writing from Syracuse, where she received the Shirley Jackson Prize in fiction, the Leonard Brown Prize in poetry, and a Graduate Dean's Award for excellence in research and creative work. She's working on a collection of stories and a novel. Please welcome Zainab.
Okay. This mask smells like cumin because it was in my kitchen, so the whole reading I had this lovely aroma of cumin in my face. But Andrew, thank you so much. Laura, as usual, I think you're like this associative genius. The whale with the pith, that was incredible, so thank you for reading. And it's an honor to read with you. Really grateful to be here. Thank you everyone for coming out. We really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm gonna read from a story today. And this story is from a collection of stories that I'm working on, and all of the stories sort of deal with the end of the world. So the word apocalypse is a derivative of the Greek verb apokalyptein, which means to take the cover off something, to uncover. And I guess writing fiction is sort of my way of doing it, to uncover, disclose, and reveal something is what I'm trying to do. I'm going to read the first half of a story titled Aliens, which is funny because so I moved here to the US for school, and my student visa has ended. So I'm currently applying for an artist visa. And this artist visa is actually called the visa for aliens of extraordinary ability. So, yeah. And if U.S. immigration deems me worthy, I will be an alien of extraordinary ability. And so, you know, the title Aliens sort of works in both ways. It's about two brothers who are immigrants. They immigrated from Turkey, but it's also about aliens. Okay. Aliens. My brother Kerem was living in Los Angeles, where, he said, the plants were dying. He called me last month crying after he read an essay on the intelligence of plants. He told me about a professor who was studying the idea of plant intelligence by dropping potting shame plants onto the ground. The professor had chosen shame plants, of course, because they were known to fold their leaves inward when threatened. After being dropped over and over again, the professor's plants, 56 of them to be exact, now refused to close their leaves. It wasn't clear if this was a sign of adaptation or giving up. Why is the world so cruel? Kerem asked. As if you didn't already know, I said. Stop being such an American. Kerem was really worried about the palm trees lining the street outside his window. He kept talking about how iconic these palm trees were to Los Angeles, as if their fame entitled them to extra water. He said they looked drought-stressed and that the edges of their leaves were browning. He said that their withered stems made them weaker, more susceptible to spider mites, beetles, and weevils, pests that consume not at once, but slowly. Death isn't something that should be delighted in, he said, and took a long pause. Then he talked a while about the life cycle of pathogens, the flow of oxygen to carbon dioxide based on the breakdown of dead matter, and asked me to draw a circle on a piece of paper so that the cycle of life and death made more tangible sense to me. I told him I already knew what a circle looked like, to which he said I would need a compass to draw a proper one anyway, insinuating that I was lacking either the proper tools or direction needed to truly grasp the concept of our existence. I bought a plane ticket to see him after that conversation. My brother was just like our father. They could spend days, weeks, holed up, obsessing over a single fact, ignoring the rest of their responsibilities, convinced that the world was ending. This is why I didn't like climate change. I didn't know how to convince Kerem that we were going to be okay when all the data shows that we're not. He was never one to cave in. Once, when we were little and it was a particularly hot summer, he had tried to explode the very sun with a slingshot. I arrived in LAX a week after our conversation. I couldn't believe that I had flown for an entire 6 hours from New York only to land on the other side of the same damn country. It was my first time in Los Angeles, and I had this picture in my head of it being a beach city, with everyone walking the streets in bikinis and shorts like some beach resort. I hadn't really packed anything substantial with me, except for a pair of jeans, and it was getting chilly. I told Kerem the weather wasn't as hot as I expected it to be. He handed me a sweater from the back seat as he kept driving. Los Angeles reminded me of Turkey in the summer, of the small coastal towns by the Aegean Sea. I kept expecting to see the water just over each hill, but it never came. Everything was yellow and dirt-colored, like a city jaundiced. No blue apart from the sky, which was so blue and hazy that it seemed fake somehow. We both moved to the US around the same time, me for work, him for college. And then I'm sort of skipping ahead. What basically happens is that they're in this car driving, and Kerem, the little brother, sort of like insists on showing him this video. He's like, I took this video, it's so cool. And it's this video of like this UFO sighting. And they go back and forth, and Eden's like, I don't get how this is a UFO. And he sort of dares his little brother to prove that UFOs exist. My brother always took a dare. One time, he not only ate a fistful of dirt, but slurped an entire gray snail right out of its shell. Another time, he pissed out of his bedroom window and onto a crate of cauliflower that was being stored outside of the neighboring grocery store. I told him all this alien talk was starting to make him sound like those men in Turkey who drove around the country in trailers full of alien memorabilia and always voted for independent candidates. I'd forgotten about that one alien trailer we'd visited as kids during our summer trip to Çeşme on the western coast. The trailer had been parked right at the entrance of the beach strip of Altınkum. Our parents hadn't allowed us to go into the trailer, so we'd schemed, waiting for a moment of distraction, which came while our father was busy playing backgammon with his friend, and our mother was trying to vigorously exercise in the sea with a pink pool noodle. As the big brother, I was in charge of an allowance of 10 liras to last us the whole trip, 2 of which I'd spent to buy ice cream for Kerem because he'd wanted it, and the rest to pay for our entrance fees for this alien exhibition. We were still wet, dripping with sea, and Kerem also with the ice cream that was melting down his arm when we entered that trailer. It had seemed so big from the outside, like an endless labyrinth of mystery. "Welcome to the other side," it said. "Are you open-minded? Are you ready?" I remember it was very cold inside the trailer, very dark. There was a neon green trail of lights on the floor and a few spotlights on the walls with photographs under each spotlight. We were supposed to follow the trail of lights and look at each photograph in order until we got to the very end where the main attraction was. Kerem and I looked at each other and skipped everything else, beelining towards the main attraction. I remember holding his hand before we opened the velvet curtain to see what was on the other side of it. The main attraction was another photo, but it was blurry and of a creature with a big head and 2 big bug eyes. The creature had a narrow chin and a skinny body with very long arms, but a stomach that stuck out. It had very pale skin. It looked like it could be dead. That was one of the first times I'd seen what death could look like. The lifelessness is what came as a shock to me. The thing was dead. Why did it matter if it was human or not? I sometimes wished I could see into Kerem's head to witness how he remembered things. In my memory, he was small, crying, running out of the trailer after seeing that photo. But I wondered if he had cried because he was scared of the alien or cried because the alien was dead. Before I could even ask Kerem if he remembered the trailer, he pulled up into a driveway and stopped the car. This seemed like a trendy neighborhood, and I wondered how he could afford it. I knew exactly how much our parents helped him with money because they'd stopped being able to afford it due to the lira's depreciation, and I'd secretly started chipping in. He must have recognized the look on my face because he told me that the house was actually owned by a close friend of his named Tom, and that the only reason he was able to afford it was because he shared it with 5 other people. I was a little confused because I hadn't heard about this new living situation before. I tried to ask him more questions, but he told me that there would be a party tonight in my honor and I'd get to meet everyone soon. He told me that if we walked for 5 minutes down the street that we could see the ocean, and he seemed proud to be able to give me this proximity to water I'd been hoping for. What I'd noticed about Los Angeles was that no 2 houses were alike. I stood looking at a gaudy Spanish-style mansion covered in ivy that was right next to a hyper-modern Japanese-inspired house. People here were so comfortable being individuals that they didn't care what the neighborhood as a whole looked like. Okay, so just as a little break, if you could all humor me, and this is sort of like a little insight to how I teach too, I guess, but if you could raise your hands, I'm kind of curious. How many of you in the audience believe in aliens? Okay. How many of you have seen a UFO or have encountered something? Okay. How many of you want to believe? Yes. Okay. At this point in the story, the brothers are now inside the house, and Kerem is trying to convince Eren that aliens are real. Kerem took out some folders from a drawer. He asked me to promise him that I would keep an open mind. I told him I would. But no, really, he said. Okay, I told him. I promise I'm listening. He proceeded to show me anatomical drawings of an alien head. He explained that an alien head resembled a human's head, sort of, but that it was more well-formed and evolved. He showed me a black and white photo of an alien taken from the side and told me that this photo was from Area 51 and that the alien was famous, named J-Rod. J-Rod looked like he could be human except for his unusually large crown and exaggerated facial features. He had a nose so small it was almost flat. His ears looked swollen and deformed. His eyes were these two big black orbs. Have you ever noticed how all aliens portrayed in movies look exactly like J-Rod's? Kerem asked. He then continued to talk to me about how Hollywood was actually a front to feed the general population certain bites of information. Think of Argo, he said, where they pretended to make a fake sci-fi flick to rescue American hostages from Tehran, or Wag the Dog. Are you saying that some of the footage we see on the news is fabricated? I asked. Think of Sean Penn, he said. I hadn't thought about Sean Penn in a while. I don't think anyone had. They literally used him to capture El fucking Chapo. It was true that Hollywood held power and that spreading culture was a neo-colonial method of control, but I didn't get what any of this had to do with aliens. He sat me down on his office chair and proceeded to show me different clips from movies on his laptop. E.T., Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Signs, Cocoon. What do the aliens in these movies look like, he asked. Like aliens, I said. Like J-Rod, he said. I wasn't sure if this was a nervous breakdown. I wondered if he was too overwhelmed with school, if he was failing his classes again, if he was doing drugs. I wondered if it was time for us to take a trip back home. Kerem wasn't exactly happy here. He missed our mom. He missed the food. Our parents had basically forced him to come to America with me after he'd come out to them. They hadn't known what else to do. There were only 7 alien movies before 1950, he said. And guess when this photo of J-Rod was taken? I'm going to guess 1950, I said. He seemed proud of my answer, like a professor who thought he was getting somewhere with his lecture. But I still didn't understand what the bottom line was. So what if this image of J-Rod had been a template for Hollywood aliens? Everything was inspired by something else. There was no such thing as an original thought. Kerem explained that the reason Hollywood used J-Rod as a template was so that they could acclimate us to when a real alien encounter happens. It wasn't a coincidence that most aliens in movies look the same. They're trying to get us used to the idea before we encounter them. They're going to come, he said. They're going to come save us. Save us from what? I asked. From ourselves. He told me about aliens shooting down ballistic missiles before they could even land on the ground. Apparently, they'd done this throughout history. He asked me why I thought a nuclear war hadn't happened so far, even though we had the technology, a sense of humanity, amity. He told me not to be so naive, that humans couldn't help themselves, that we'd already tried, but again, it had been aliens who had prevented the nuclear wars too. With climate change getting worse, he said, I hope they'll come save us from that too. He was talking so fast I couldn't stop him. He showed me more news clippings of mummified aliens in Nazca, of a meteorite of seaweed fossil that crashed into Sri Lanka, of airplane-looking artifacts left over by the ancient Kimbaya people in South America. He told me that the proof of aliens lied within astronauts, with the men who had actually been shot into space. He opened another folder and showed me clippings of interviews with a man named Edgar Mitchell, a Navy astronaut who was the 6th man to walk on the moon. Then he opened the door to his closet to get some more folders. But I noticed some pretty serious camera equipment in there too. When I asked him who the camera equipment belonged to, he told me it was an investment so that he could take more time-lapse videos of the sky. I told him he couldn't afford this, that he should be focusing on school, but he wasn't interested in school anymore, he said. Plus, there was so much more money to be made through YouTube. I was so frustrated with him that I didn't even know what to do. He was selfish, he was spoiled, he didn't understand what it takes to be an adult. I had always tried to be the kind of big brother to him that I would have wanted, protecting him, taking care of him, making sure he felt supported. But now I see how I may have hindered his growth. What was he going to do? Film the sky until it opened up and aliens came gliding down from the heavens to drape him in jewels and gold? Did he think I actually liked working as a consultant? That it was fun for me constantly to talk to people who had no substance other than talking about where they ate out at or what they bought? That I liked fake laughing my way through PG jokes, attending meetings only to do icebreakers as a fucking adult? I mean, I did like wearing a suit. And sure, the money was great, but it's not like I felt good about myself and my actual soul. I decided to go out for a walk instead of losing my patience with Kerem. There was another hour or so before the sun set, and I wanted to see the beach anyway. I told Kerem that I had to step out to take care of some work calls. It was a Saturday, but it's not like he knew the difference. I was glad that it was crowded on the boardwalk. I didn't like being in calm spaces when my head didn't feel steady. Venice was chaotic in exactly the way I needed it to be. There were street performers and acrobats and a woman on stilts. I opened up my dating apps and started swiping through to see what type of women I could match with if I lived out here instead. I didn't have a girlfriend at the moment and didn't want one either. I had enough people to take care of. Plus, I hadn't been able to truly like anyone in a while. The last woman I dated had some potential. She was Armenian American and worked as a marketing manager for a bank. We got drunk and argued about politics as foreplay. She had these breasts that were the exact size of my palms. I broke up with her before coming to LA because I realized it would have never worked out between us in the long run. I walked towards the ocean and took off my sneakers and socks. I liked the feeling of warm sand under my feet. I liked being reminded of the world's age as I stepped on these tiny pieces of soft rocks eroded over time. I often told Kerem that neither of us mattered in the grand scheme of things, that our lives were minuscule compared to the entirety of human history. This was meant as a comfort, of course, as a way to show him that we were small even when our problems seemed big. I don't know if this was as helpful to him as it was for me. The sun had started setting like a half-healed bruise, splendidly yellow against the blue and purple sky. I could see why Kerem wished for life up there. Any being that comes through that must be just as sublime. On my way back, I saw a street vendor selling toys and brought Kerem a plush green alien as a peace offering. I didn't exactly feel like going to a party, so I found a bar on the way and took a couple of shots to lubricate my senses. When I got home, the party had already started. I found Kerem and became quick friends with his friends too. One of his friends, Amanda, had been flirting with me the entire time by asking me about the political turmoil in my home country. Hey, are you okay? She asked, like, really okay? I took another sip from my drink. It could be worse. To be honest, I sometimes like this attention, but I didn't know how to explain the entire situation, let alone explain and flirt at the same time. I didn't know how to explain that there had been so many bombings recently that people were scared to go out, or that a gunman entered Istanbul's most famous nightclub on New Year's Eve last year and started shooting people down. I spent that New Year's at a friend's house party, constantly refreshing Twitter on my phone, hoping for some better news, but it was all just videos uploaded from the scene that I couldn't stop myself from watching. There was this one video someone had posted from outside of the club. There was a young woman lying on the ground. Half of her hair was over her face. There was a pool of red under her head. The person filming her was a man who was clearly a stranger to her, but he kept talking to her. "Sister, are you okay?" he asked. "You're alive, right, sister?" As the pool of red under her head spread. "You're alive. Okay, come on, sister, you're alive." The camera moved around, then back to the dead woman. "I'll be back, okay?" he said. "Just try not to move." Kerem told his friends to change the topic. I think he was worried about what I'd think of them, deem them too American or something. "Let's talk about something random," he said. "Something not about Turkey." "A guy I slept with last night wanted to buy my cum," Chris offered. "What do you mean?" Amanda asked. "Like to make a child?" Chris leaned in. "To eat." "Oh, do you provide snacks to go now, Chris?" Kerem was cackling. "Is this a part of your one-night stand services? Thanks for sleeping with me. Here's your goodie bag." "Like those almond butter sachets," Amanda said. "I think they're called squeeze packs," I said. Chris mimed some light squeezing. "Maybe he's low-carbing," Kerem said. Amanda almost spit out her drink, and he wanted it locally sourced. "Organic?" I asked. "I do follow a pretty good diet," Chris said. I should have been more flattered. I suggested a round of shots. We were all pretty tipsy at this point. We decided to get some air out in the backyard. The night was cool. I don't know why, but I looked up at the sky, hoping to see something. I couldn't even see any stars. Someone made a bonfire. We sat around it. The flames rose as flames do, looking at the night. Kerem sat across from me. Half of his face was illuminated by this orange glow, and he seemed so warm, like whatever was on his inside was reflecting on the outside, like the warmth of his soul was seeping through his skin. He seemed so carefree, so happy, comfortable enough that anything could happen, and he would still be glowing like this. Then Kerem lifted his head and looked up at the sky. He seemed worried now. The light only illuminated his most prominent features, casting shadows over his eyes. He looked like a cratered moon. I asked him what was wrong. "The palm trees," he said, looking at the 2 tall palm trees in the backyard with balding heads. I'll stop there. Thank you.
All right, guys, join me in a huge round of applause. Woo! For Laura and Zainab. It's pretty cool to be in the presence of 2 aliens of such extraordinary ability. So thank you both. For everyone in the audience who is local to Provincetown, who was inspired by what they heard tonight, I did want to share that we have recently announced our summer workshop program. And so if you're interested in coming to Provincetown this summer and working with master writers and poets and developing your own skill set similar to these beautiful women, please do consider taking a course. Thank you, everyone.
You didn't get your discount.